Great. Well, I guess we'll get started because we have so much to cover. Hello, my name is Christy O'Malonic, and I'm the Network Engagement Manager here at the Children in Nature Network. I am glad you are all here. Welcome to our Family Time in Nature events, which is part of our Families Together and Nature series. This initiative provides both inspiration and practical tips for getting more outdoor activities onto the family calendar and more of nature's benefits into the lives of children. Throughout the year, we'll be offering Families Together in Nature events, highlighting family programs and leaders in the Children in Nature movement, like the two guests we have today, and sharing tools and resources like the Vitamin N Challenge, which is brought to you this year with support from Nature's Way, a company that offers wellness products. I want to respectfully acknowledge that I'm joining you today from the ancestral land of the Munsee Lenape people in New Jersey. We invite you to share the Indigenous land history of your location in the chat. If you are not familiar with the history of your location, you can learn about Indigenous territories and lands with Native Land Map. We're sharing a link in the chat. In addition to land acknowledgements, there are some other ways that you can support Indigenous people every day. You can educate yourself on Indigenous issues, advocate for land back to the Indigenous peoples from whom it was taken, follow Indigenous social media accounts to reshare and amplify Indigenous voices year-round, and support Indigenous causes and Indigenous-owned businesses. Thanks for everyone sharing in the chat where you are coming from. Before we get started, I'm just going to go over some more event logistics. Closed captioning has been enabled. Please use the Q&A function on the Zoom for any questions for our panelists. We will have time for question and answer at the end of the hour. And chat is enabled for all the attendees, so feel free to comment. So without further ado, it is now my pleasure to welcome and introduce our esteemed guests. We have Denice Rochelle. Denice is the founder and director of the Bronze Chapter, a nonprofit organization that creates community at the intersection of identity and the outdoors. The Bronze Chapter reconnects Black, Indigenous, and other people of color to the natural world through outdoor skill sharing and recreation. Thank you so much for being here today, Denice.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Heather. Heather Kuhlken is the founder and executive director of Families in Nature. The vision of Families in Nature is to inspire all families to fall in love with nature and foster the next generation of conservationists. Families in Nature strives to engage families of all backgrounds with children of all ages. So glad you could join us today, Heather.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Thanks so much for being here today. The topic is families and nature. So first things first, what is a family? Denice, can you talk a little bit about how the Bronze Chapter defines family?
Much broader than families of origin or blood relations. The Bronze Chapter defines family as whoever you have a love for, positive vibes, comfort, and safe feelings, the people that you want to be around and the people you want to share your life with. In a nutshell.
Great, I love that. Not necessarily the people that you were, your bloodline or people that you were born into, but those that you choose to surround yourself with.
Yes.
And, you know, here at the Children in Nature Network, we have children in our namesake, and our main focus is children. But Heather, at Families in Nature, you have chosen to intentionally focus on families instead of children. Can you speak more about that?
I can. So we define family as however you define family. So we also have that chosen family. But in a model where there's multiple generations of family and we have parents and grandparents and possibly guardians or aunts and uncles, we have intentionally designed our programs to teach the adults too, because if you just teach the kids, they can't necessarily choose to go out and do things on their own. But if you teach the parents and help parents or guardians or grandparents or aunts and uncles if you teach them to feel confident and comfortable and competent outside, then all the kids are much more likely to get to have these experiences over and over again. So if you teach them, the parents, to canoe, then the parents are more likely to go out and rent a canoe to take the whole family out again or camp again.
So why should families spend time in nature? What's in it for them? Denice, I know that I think you just recently had a camping trip this past weekend, right? Can you
Family camp out
to some of the benefits that you've seen as a result of engaging these families in nature programming?
Yeah, very much dovetails with what Heather was just saying. We really need the buy-in of families, aside from just youth programming. I noticed in my programs that family-centered, for instance, campouts and programs, they're just more appealing. They feel safer. There's more support. We get a lot of feedback about, I wouldn't have come to this if it wasn't family-centered. I wouldn't feel comfortable bringing my child who I've never brought before camping, or, I don't know how they'll do in this new group, new people that they don't know. So on top of the support that kids get in this environment, it's also important the support that the families get, just bringing their kids out, having support to learn a new skill, to set up a tent. Maybe they haven't set up their tent for a really long time, and it's not something that they want to take on in a group that might not understand if their kid has a meltdown while they're doing it, or there's just all these components that it's just very comfortable and safe and encouraging and uplifting when families can get out and do these things, learn these skills together. That's what I'm finding more and more, and that's really where I'm liking to direct my energies as opposed to just youth programs.
Great. And what was your impetus for starting the Bronze chapter?
Oh, long story. Mostly, in a nutshell, I still wasn't seeing people who look like me outdoors, participating in sports or outdoor recreation or activities in skilled ways. So more than just kind of a basic or entry-level activity, although even that, but I just saw a big gap of skill, and also a big gap of solo participation in outdoor sports and activities and recreation. And the gap seems to be, I don't have anyone to go with, I don't have equipment to do this thing, and I don't have skill to do this thing, and I don't feel safe. So kind of all those things put together gave me the idea to just start self-funded renting campgrounds, and offering to teach BIPOC community how to camp and learn outdoor skills. That's how it started in 2018. And then it kind of over time, it grew to be too much. I couldn't self-fund it anymore. Also, there became a liability issue. More people, we need to have a little protection umbrella here for everybody's comfort and safety. And so I had two choices: for-profit model or nonprofit model. And the nonprofit model felt closer to my heart. And really, that's how I did it. I learned how to do it along the way. I'm still learning how to do it along the way. I'm still kind of just following my intuition and my gut and what I see, and connecting with community and seeing what community wants, and trying to make that bridge and create a more skilled outdoor BIPOC community in the process.
Sure. Do you want to add to that? What are some of the benefits you've seen as a result of engaging families in your work?
So I would say that one of the things that I love best is seeing the families put down their distractions, put down their phones, and really connect with each other and make those memories that end up being the basis of their adult relationships when the kids are grown. So today, so many families are running 90 different directions to drive this kid to that and this kid to the other thing. And, you know, both parents typically work. And so there's not a lot of time to just be together. And so we focus on leaving a lot of empty space for families to just enjoy being outside together, and let siblings form memories together, be on the same team, so to speak, and have fun together. Because if kids, you know, siblings just don't have a lot of time together. So many things are age and gender divided, and everyone is so overscheduled these days. Kind of regardless of income, they're still overscheduled. The school takes up an enormous amount of time and after school activities, and you know, it's very hard to get family time into the calendar. And so I love to provide the opportunity for families to really sink into time together. A camp out is ideal, but even 2 or 3 hours on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock, it's a time when soccer usually isn't. And so you can just create some space, give them an activity to start with, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then let them form memories together. And so that builds a lot of mental health, because family connection, especially for adolescents, is so closely associated with mental health, and parents getting time together to just enjoy each other and enjoy their kids. And when you do it with a bunch of friends, you also build community, and healthy communities, healthy families, healthy teens and kids. It all can happen from just playing outside together.
Right. Yeah, definitely, you know, lack of time, overscheduling, lack of representation. These are all different challenges that families have in getting their families into nature. And you know, we all have, I think we could come up with a list a mile long, right, of barriers and challenges. So don't really want to focus on those too much. I'm glad we've already started to identifying, you know, some of those solutions to overcoming some of those challenges, you know, camping, programming, but you know, what else is there? If I only have an hour on a Sunday afternoon and I'm like, okay, like I'm gonna get outside in nature with my kids, like what do I do? Like, what do I do to make that happen? What do I do when I'm outside with my kids?
Just an arrow to Heather.
Sure, Heather, do you want to take that one? What would you do?
Sure. So we really focus on play-based science lessons outside. I find that if you give a very small lesson, I mean 2 to 5 minute lesson, it can kind of inspire people to play together. So if you imagine a camp out and people arrive and they don't necessarily know each other yet, and the kids today are so used to having information poured into them. It's not as common to go out and seek things as it used to be. Boredom is not really a thing kids experience in the same way, because there is technology to entertain them whenever they want, to some degree. And even at school, a lot is sort of put into them instead of them having to go and find it and use their curiosity. So I find that if you give a short activity, such as a spider hike, to give them a headlamp and teach them to go look at glitter in the grass. And if you follow that glitter with your eyes, it's actually a spider. And so you can give a 1-sentence biology lesson, which is, you know, there's a membrane in the back of the eye that's reflective to let nocturnal animals gather light. And then the physics is that it only works with a headlamp. If you hold a flashlight out to the side, it doesn't work, because the angle of reflection only works with a headlamp. You've got a physics lesson and a biology lesson, and then 2 hours of kids and parents running around in the dark with headlamps on looking for spiders, and they inevitably find all kinds of things. But in that process, they actually get to know each other, because they've parallel played first. They've they've walked in the same direction first to share an experience, which then can help them build friendships 20 minutes later. And so while you're doing that, by basing it in science, you give them new eyes to look at nature through, and you give them deeper connection, because it's just a spider. Everybody has seen spiders, but to really look up and focus on that little spider that you found in the dark is a connection point. And that helps people fall in love with nature. And when we teach people to fall in love with nature, we have the basis of all of conservation work. And so the other reason to bring families outside, the other benefit of families spending time in nature, is loving nature, falling in love with nature, which brings us the next generation and the current generation of adults of conservationists.
Yeah, that was a great, I saw somebody commented here in the chat, this is a great example. It's a really great example.
So where can you find more? I'll answer real quick. I've written a book. It's not yet published, but hopefully in the next few months it'll be published. And it has 1,126 lessons to teach outside to all ages and all people all over the place. And for now, you can get it if you go through our guide training. I give out the manuscript for the Families in Nature guides. But hopefully it'll be available in the next year for anyone, anywhere to take and use. And I created it as a community resource, and I've been writing it for 10 years. So
I'm buying that book.
Hopefully it's out soon.
Someone wants to know how they can stay updated about when your book gets published. I would assume that they could just follow Families in Nature on social media, right?
You can follow Families in Nature on social media. You can join us, and then you'll get our newsletter and get invited to events. Get invited to things like I'm leading a trip to Honduras next year to see the healthiest coral reef in all of the Atlantic Ocean. So how can you buy it in the UK? We will have it as an ebook, so you can easily get it online. Also, I'm sure that we'll blast it out with all of our partners, because we work really intentionally through collaboration. So, but yes, follow us on social media. I'm sure that we'll definitely send it out.
Great. And Denice, what are some next steps or actions or ideas or games that you have used with the families that you are working with to get the families out into nature?
I would say, I'm going to kind of preface that to, once I've already gotten them out into nature, what can we do to kind of get them engaged and not just sitting around, say, if we're camping, not just sitting around the campsite, actually maybe learning about the space, you know, about the trees, about whatever's growing there, about what's happening in the water, about the purpose of this waterway, all those things. And it really just depends on where we're at and what I see around me. I actually don't have a list or this great book like Heather created. So it's kind of just what I'm feeling at the moment, what I'm seeing, what resources I'm finding around me that I can kind of, you know, use in any given moment. But I actually wrote down some ideas on the fly of something I would do, just imagining that I was in a space. So I'll read them really quickly. Let's see. So I have put one activity on the calendar you can do together each month of the year, whether it's on a weekday or a weekend. Examples like take a walk or ride your bike after dinner, you know, walk around your neighborhood or park to identify trees or flowers or leaves, go to the nearest water and put your feet in, build a sandcastle, go to a viewpoint at the beach or the park, and draw or write poems or a haiku of what you see, smell, hear, and feel, kind of engage with the space. I also like to play with being spontaneous. Something Heather talked about was having empty space, intentional empty space. with families outdoors. And I think that that's really important. I do see a kind of tug and urge to have structured time all the time outdoors. And I kind of push back against that, and it's like, let's just go with it. Life is so structured anyway. Let's try to be spontaneous. So one thing I like to do is I like to just grab whatever papers around and make, little tags with a N, S, E, and W, north, south, east, and west. Put them in a hat or something, and then, somebody will pick a tag, and then they will have to either, figure out what direction that is. Use your phone or your compass, get yourself oriented in that direction, and then describe what you see, like to describe the whole visual of what you see, and then talk about that. Something else that I jotted down was do something you've never done before with a friend and have zero expectations about the outcome. And maybe that can look like sleeping in a tent in each other's yard, or getting some sticks and roasting marshmallows in your yard and see who stops by, or at your campground, see who stops by, have some extra sticks. I also like to find shapes in nature. So you can take your phone or your camera or your drawing supplies and select geometric shapes that you see in nature, like this shape of this blade of grass. Well, what shape is that? This leaf, what shape is that? This wave is making this shape, what would you call that? And I also like to I like to play with the compass a lot. I like to get families and kids used to directional orientation, kind of learning wayfinding through playing. So kind of the same kind of thing. And sometimes I just will give a family a compass and say, what do you want to do with this thing? And they come up with some spontaneous, super fun idea to, let's go do this. Like, let's walk 20 paces in this direction and see what we find, or something very easy like that. Something that has kind of ideas and activities that have, that are easy to do, low bar, and all ages can do them. And that's the kind of stuff I like to do to get people engaged. And I learn things that way too, because I'm part of the playing. So I think it's really reciprocal, and I just love being part of that.
Yeah, those are great ideas. Thanks. I was thinking while you were sharing, I was thinking two things. One, for my children, they are 8.5 and almost 11. And sometimes to get them outside, I have to have a plan. But then once I'm outside, I have to be willing to abandon the plan. So it's like, have the plan to get them outside, but then be willing to abandon the plan because they get interested in something else, which is fabulous, but I have to be able to go with that. And then the other thing, when you were saying, on the fly, I was also thinking that a lot of our nature experiences are like while we're waiting, like sitting in the car waiting to pick someone up, or, walking to a friend's house, or just kind of the in-between spaces. And in my opinion, that totally counts, that it doesn't always have to be put on your hiking boots and pack a bag and, go to a destination. And some of these activities like nature shapes, or nature sounds or colors are kind of some of those things that are easy to do on the fly, to kind of engage the senses. And someone asked a question in the chat, would you be able to give us ideas for infants? And that's, I think, just having them outside is the idea. Having them to be able to utilize their, senses, touch water, sand, dirt, get dirty, those sort of things.
That's kind of what I do with infants. I don't have kids, and so I just all my exposure to kids are people I know kids, people who bring their kids to camp. I love kids, so I think I have a good vibe with them naturally, but I don't have my own. So I learn a lot by just watching kids. I learn a lot by kids and infants. You know, they have no filter. They're just so real, and they're on purpose, and they're like in the moment. And I just, a lot of times with little infants, I just kind of get down to their level as best I can and and I do what they do, you know. They touch something, I'll touch something. They'll smoosh something, I'll smoosh it, you know. And then, you know, I'll do something and see if they copy me. I mean, that's kind of how I try to get them, and then, you know, introduce like, oh, here's a branch, I'm going to touch it on your skin, and you know. I think infants are I kind of just copy them and see where it goes. That's what I do. I'm sure Heather has a million ideas because she has over 1,000 in her book.
I've also had some kids, so I have 3, and I find that really young infants, I mean, my sister had a baby last weekend, and just looking at the textures and even looking up through the trees at the light and dark, kind of almost sparkling light coming through the tree leaves is fascinating to an infant and helps develop their eyesight to start seeing further and further away, because an infant really only sees at about, I guess it's about an 8-inch distance is their ideal focal point for new babies. So when you show them things like leaves and different patterns of light, it can help them start to sharpen that eyesight that's a little further away. But then when they get to be, you know, 6 months to crawling age and beginning to want to walk, textures, they love textures, fuzzy leaves and kind of prickly leaves that aren't actually sharp, but like, you know, the edges of leaves can be a little bit different texture than the soft ones or smooth leaves. Letting them touch things, showing them movement, a bug crawling, a bird flying. My niece is 20 months and she goes bonkers for bees. And it's one of her favorite words is bees. And she has, you know, she's 20 months old, but she will pick out a bee 20 feet away. And I mean, our adult eyes probably can't even see the bee, but she sees it. And so they love movement and sounds and that stimulation and textures. And then the most important thing, there's a book called Balanced and Barefoot, which I think is one of the best child development books that I've read. And it talks about the need for bare feet outside and how children take in sensory information through their feet. And we have a lot of nerves in our feet. And it also helps them develop coordination and brain balance as well as physical balance. And so I highly recommend that book. But take the shoes off, take them outside in a safe place. Texas, you got to really choose correctly for bare feet, but take them outside barefoot, let them feel the grass and feel sand and things like that for little ones. And be in wonder and awe with them. Like what Denice is saying, my favorite part of my job, I've been doing this now for 15 plus years. I've been an outdoor educator since I was 12. And my favorite thing is to see nature through their eyes, to harness your inner 8-year-old and feel that wonder and awe at a parent bird feeding a baby bird or a bug doing something weird. It's so fun to feel that wonder and awe again as an adult. And it models to parents to allow them to feel wonder and awe instead of being self-conscious. If you take other people outside and you model that awe and wonder and participation, like Denice is saying, match the children's behavior, touch the leaf with them, then you release the parents from being self-conscious and you encourage them also to feel wonder and awe, which is so tied to mental health and learning.
What was the name of that book again, Heather?
It's called Balanced and Barefoot.
Thanks.
Maybe Barefoot and Balanced. I don't know. The author is very nice. I like her very much.
Someone added a link in the chat. Thanks, Catherine. We have a question in the chat. Maybe you can speak to this, Denice. What are the best ways to engage all ages when working with families?
All
Any
ages
tips
when
for working with different ages?
When this situation, for me, when this situation happens, I tend to, because I don't have all the answers, because I don't have kids and I'm not an educated outdoor, I don't have an outdoor degree. It's not my path. So I like to ask, what do you want to do? Like, you know, I get a consensus, you know, I get some buy-in from other people. I'm not the one saying, we're going to do this, let's do this. Sometimes I do. And then, but, you know, we take it to another place where there can be some add-in. So that's usually where I start, you know, hey, we're all here. Like, what does everybody, what do you want to do? And then just try to do, you know, a bit of it that we can, that everybody wants to do. That seems to work really well when everybody feels heard and has some buy-in. Even if you don't get to something that somebody wanted to do, there's usually just so much good positive energy around just doing it together that they were even asked in the first place, you know, what you might want to do, what would this look like to you? Let's do this thing. So that's kind of where I go with that.
I completely agree with that. I love starting the year with a question of, what do you guys want to do? And maybe if they don't have any ideas, I'll come up with a few, I'll seed them with some ideas. And, but usually people have all kinds of ideas, and then you just have to tell them, no, you can't go and, you know, ride unicorns. So the kids come up with all kinds of things, real and imagined, but usually you can get a pretty solid list of a whole year's activity with 30 minutes of brainstorming with families. But as far as engaging multiple ages together on any event, we will have frequently 4-month-olds through 22-year-old kids with parents and grandparents. So really you've got the full spectrum for 4 months to 75 or 80 on any of our trips. And I find that the ticket is to get the kids to teach, empower. 6-year-olds know everything. I don't care what the subject is, ask a 6-year-old and know that they will confidently answer you, and usually they are right, which is hilarious. If you have a 6-year-old or a 9-year-old even spend 2 minutes teaching about whatever bug they found, you have everyone wrapped. I also am a huge fan of putting the teens in charge of the tots, because, you know, there is no reason a 15-year-old cannot carry the baby backpack and give a parent a break. And they love it. They love being trusted. Teenagers, all they want in the world is to be respected and trusted. And so give them a toddler and they are on it. I find that the peer learning and the peer teaching builds leadership, and the kids hear it better than if I say something. So I joke that my whole goal at the end of the day is to teach nothing and to let them teach each other. So I would say engaging all ages is way, way easier than you would ever imagine it is if you just encourage them to play with each other. It's how humans have existed for millennia, and we've only very recently divided them by age. And so if you just normalize having a baby and a 21-year-old and a 40-year-old and a 70-year-old at the same place at the same time, that's how small communities function anyway. So you're just sort of using human nature and making it enjoyable and playful. But it is very fun to have a 9-year-old teaching about clouds and having the 3-year-olds and the adults wrapped listening to them. So I highly encourage you to get kids to say what they're thinking and get everybody excited, and then hand those babies to the teenagers.
Great. There was another question in the chat. Thanks to Heather for answering it. We'll see if Denice has anything to add. It was, what successful techniques have you used to recruit families to your experiences? So I know that you're in it right now, Denice. How are you? What techniques are you using to build and grow the Bronze chapter and get people out to join you?
Specifically related to families, you're asking. Because our programs, we have individual program, we have individuals coming to our programs, couples and families. But as this regards to families, we just put it out there in the words and the verbiage, this family centering. And we talk about it and we show photos of it. And, mostly I just talk about it. I just let people know that this is a safe place for you to bring your family. This is a safe place for your family to be, for your family to learn, for your family to participate. And just knowing that we are acknowledging the family in the event, I think is a really big deal. I mean, that's the feedback that we've gotten, that that we just said, this is what we're doing and this is the space we're providing. The event we just had this weekend, this EB Hiking Camp, was only for families. And that's the first time we've had an event that was only for families. And it was a really good experience. We're definitely going to do it again. Most of our programs are not family only. This one was really great because it just happened that the kids that came, they were all in this, like basically within 3 years of each other, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. Yeah, so that was really great. Just saying this is what it is, and you can feel comfortable and have some trust and comfort and security in this environment.
I can expand on the answer I typed in the chat, but basically I would say in the very beginning, I mean, if the very, very beginning, how you start what I call a nature community, what Richard Louv called a family nature club, is to invite who you know. Invite 2 families, 3 families, your neighbors, and again, define family as whatever family means to the people who are coming. We have a lot of college students now who come with their kind of chosen family, and they'll bring a bunch of roommates along, which is super fun. We have a paid internship program, and so they tend to bring all their roommates, which is great. And that's a family too, right? Frequently they spend Thanksgiving together, right? So invite who you know, start there, and then make really trusting, open friendships within communities you would like to invite, and then invite them. And the way that you invite them is to ask what they would like to do instead of presuming what they would like to do. Go in. I mean, the very first Title I school that we partnered with, called Perez Elementary here in Austin, I went to 2 years of PTA meetings, even though my children are not in that school, to get to know the other parents before I ever offered an event, and created a relationship of trust first. And then slowly over time asked, what are you interested in doing? What do you want to learn? Interestingly, their favorite choice was archery. So we took archery to the school every year to a school festival for 6 years. I went and got my staff's NASP certified to be able to meet the requirements to teach archery. And so when you invite communities that are not your own community, be sure you start with friendship first, with a bridge, and create trust first, and ask, like Denice was saying earlier, ask, what would you like to do? But then, even on a small scale, if you're inviting 2 or 3 families and no one comes, or put it on a website, on a calendar, and nobody signs up, we are 15 years into doing this, and some of our campouts have 180 people and some have 6. And you never know, like maybe the school had a festival you didn't know about or whatever on that weekend. The key really is to do something that you would enjoy doing anyway, so that instead of being disappointed no one came, you can say, you know what, there was something in town that kept people from coming this time, and you can't predict everything, you know? So then take photos, share them, and invite people next time by sort of showing them what would have happened, which also builds that trust of like, this is what it would be like, which helps people feel safe. And then be sure that you have photos that represent the full spectrum of everyone that you would like to come and join you. We work with Outdoor Afro and Latino Outdoors back from 2013 to make sure our photos that are on social media invite people by showing them that they belong, and really making sure that we're doing everything we say we're doing with kindness and with trust and with friendship and by asking.
Great. We have a few more questions that have come in, but before I get to those, I also just wanted to mention that Children in Nature Network has our Vitamin N Challenge coming up. And the Vitamin N Challenge is inspired by another one of Richard Lou's book, The Vitamin N, The Essential Guide to a Nature-Rich Life, where you can find 500 activities that you can do by yourself or with your friends and family in nature. And essentially the Vitamin N Challenge is to just, choose your challenge, make a plan, and share your experience on social media. Amelia just put a link in the chat to the Vitamin N Challenge toolkit, where you can find a pledge and trackers and an excerpt of the book, and 10 challenges to get you started, with some other articles and webinars and inspiration. So the challenge officially kicks off on July 1st, but it is certainly not too early to start thinking and planning and getting your ideas in motion for that. So some more great resources to get outside in nature with your family. Let's see, Rebecca asks, what specific measures have you used to measure love of nature?
So I think that for us, the best one that I have ever heard of, and I've spent a lot of time trying to answer that question. It's very hard to get quantitative data out of qualitative research, which is what you really have to do to assess love. The Children in Nature Network has some tools for measuring nature connection. I believe that there's a toolkit for that. Christy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is one at some point. But my favorite is called Photo Voice, where you give a kid an iPad. You, like, let's say you have a camp out of 80 people, you give a kid an iPad, you send them out to take photos, or a little point and shoot camera. And then you have them choose 2 photos they'd like to share with their friends at school, their teacher, their grandparent, whoever they're going to go to home to. And then you actually record them explaining those 2 photos and what was important about it and why they chose the 2 photos. Then you can have an outside evaluator look for words like love, connection, community, fun, whatever words you would like to choose. And if you do that with maybe 30 people per camp out, it's time consuming. You do need someone there to interview them, but it's called Photo Voice. It's a research technique, and that's my favorite to use.
All right. Yeah, we do have a bunch of evaluation tools on our resource hub. I'm going to put those in the chat.
I think that's really interesting what Heather was just talking about. I never knew there was any way to assess love in any form, so very interested in that.
You can do it with a standard questionnaire as well. It's just, I have found that those questionnaires work once and then they don't work again, because the kids will answer them and the parents will answer them seriously the first time, but you give it to them 2 or 3 times, even a before and after, and the kids are like, oh, riding dolphins in the park was great. Even though you were in Central Texas, they just make stuff up. So it doesn't really work the second time in my experience, but you can also use a standard Likert scale question survey. I'll quickly answer that second question too. We do have some corporate sponsors. Osprey has been incredible for us. They've given us backpacks. Yeti's given us water bottles to get rid of plastic water bottles. It is fairly difficult after COVID to get corporate sponsors from the outdoor industry. They all love the work that all of us are doing to connect people to nature, but the pandemic was tricky on their finances, which is true for many companies right this minute. So I would say yes, absolutely, corporate sponsors are key, and it's a pretty hard moment to get them right this second.
Yeah, and the Bronze chapter doesn't have any corporate sponsors this moment.
Yeah, just thinking about measuring love of nature, and a little bit of a teaching background, and just thinking about observation, right? Rubrics. Did the child, how the child acted at the first event versus the third event, did they take off their shoes? Did they embrace the grass or what have you? But that's an interesting thing to think about, measuring love of nature.
You can also measure conservation mindedness. That's maybe an easier one. If you go with the supposition that a love of nature creates conservation mindedness, you can see how many of them pack a water bottle on the third or fourth trip instead of bringing plastic water bottles. You can see how many kids throw their stuff on the ground the first camp out when they just don't know that those straws that come with juice boxes that are, my nemesis, those straws that come with juice boxes, do they end up on the ground? Do they end up less? Like, you can also do some little measurements like that to see if people are taking ownership of being outside, taking ownership of nature, like they love it, feel like it's their place, and thus they start to take care of it more. That is also a really interesting thing to measure. So I love that one of the measures that we have that, it's not published anywhere because the sample size is too small, but my program has been going for 15 years. So we have kids that started at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and many of them have just graduated from college this May and are coming back asking for jobs and are coming back to volunteer with us, even though they're 22 and can move on and have lives of their own now. They're coming back. I have a cadre of interns that started when they were 5 with us. And so that's really fun. I think that's also a love of nature piece.
Yeah, I think, Heather, that the powers of observation are pretty strong, very telling. And I rely on that as well.
And sometimes you'll just feel it, right? I had this woman who had never been to Pedernales Falls, which is a very big limestone fall and has fossils in it and everything, because Austin used to be a marine environment thousands and thousands, millions of years ago. And she stepped out onto the edge of the overlook and she just said, with stars in her eyes, just es como un otro mundo. And it's just, she was so, you could feel how in awe she was of how different this place was. Which has been incredible, seeing people touch sand for the first time, see the ocean for the first time, see really tall trees for the first time because they've changed ecosystems from where they grew up. Having people start to go back and remember their own childhood, possibly in Mexico or El Salvador or Honduras, and just absolutely speak with such love of growing up in the forest that they didn't really realize how much they loved it until they came here. And so kind of going back and appreciating where they were raised and the waterfalls or the forest or the monkeys. And that has been also so fun to see over the years. People really loving not only the nature they're experiencing in that moment, but the nature they've always experienced from when they were children. And having the grandparents share their nature experiences as well, that is so fun.
We had a great question come in. Can you provide some ways the community can support organizations, specifically yours, Denice and Heather, but also other organizations outside of obvious ways of funding? So what are ways that we can support your organizations other than funding?
I always share with people that just amplifying what we do, you know, talking about us, sharing the work that we do, sharing about us, sharing, you know, what we've done, sharing what we want to do, the direction that we're going. Just sharing, getting the word out is really important. And it's free.
I would say for us, I totally agree with that. Share and do what we do. Take people outside. Do what we do. We train people. We have a staff of 3. So we only host so many events per year. We focus on guide training, and we train people all over the US and even outside the US to do what we do, because I don't need to be present for you to be able to go outside. I don't want to teach anyone that. This is not rocket science. Yes, I have a biology degree, but you don't need one. Really, anyone can take other people outside. If you love it, share that love, and that's all it takes. So if you are a community member and you have access to a schoolyard, invite people out on a after school picnic. Or if you go to church or have a synagogue, invite them on a picnic or a hike afterwards. Just get people to spend time in nature and enjoy time in nature. That's really the best thing. If you own land, invite organizations like ours to come onto your land and have a picnic, go for a walk, go for a swim, whatever it is. Opening private land to people, focusing on nearby nature, and the fact that even just a parking lot has so many birds. A friend of mine wrote a book called Parking Lot Birding, and you can see nightjars and chimney swifts and all kinds of things. So take people outside.
Yeah, I totally agree about that. What Heather just said about do what she does, you know, do what we do. The Bronze chapter, the core of the Bronze chapter is knowledge sharing, skill sharing, and outdoor recreation. And it doesn't just mean, you know, us sharing to you. It means, you know, we're all sharing. That's how we're growing a more skilled outdoor BIPOC community is, you know, we all share. You take what you learn, you share, you do what we do. That's really great. Thanks for adding that.
The other thing is we, our vision statement very specifically, intentionally says inspire a love of nature. That may be through photographs. It may be through sharing your own outdoor experiences on social media, poetry, paintings. We have a storytelling festival hosted through Nature for All. Really, there's so many ways to inspire people to fall in love with nature. You don't have to be someone who wants to take 20 people outside. You might be someone who's a great storyteller or a great photographer, or just wants to share your own activities. So you can take others outside, or you can also inspire people to go outside. Help your classroom teacher take the kids outside for English class or for art class or math class. Help your teachers of your kids' classrooms take the class outside, even on the school grounds.
Let's see, we have 2 more questions that came in. We'll answer them real quick, and then we'll share our final thoughts. Gloria asks, in my country, transportation is a big challenge to invite to nature spaces which are too far from the low-income marginalized communities, and in their neighborhoods, the quality of the few green spaces is very poor. Do you have the same challenge? Or I would add, what are some solutions to still getting children and families in nature with those challenges?
Absolutely. In Texas, we have terrible public transportation. Everyone here has to have a car pretty much, like, or a cousin with a car or a neighbor with a car you can use. Transportation is a massive issue here, and 98% of Texas land is privately owned, and that 2% is our state parks and a national park that is like 8 hours from the closest city by car. And so we definitely have that issue in Texas. And I would say carpool. We have a lot of families that rent a car and take a lot of people in that car. I also, on our Families in Nature website, under the Ecologist School, there's 96 lessons that are just excerpts from the book that we put out at the very beginning of COVID. And the goal of those lessons were to be given out by teachers during the pandemic, like March, April of 2020, the deep part of it where no one was leaving their house. There are things that can be done that are nature-centric and that fall in love with nature idea from an apartment. So it's things like having plants inside your home, having, there's some internet ideas, there's some just go outside and look up at the clouds. I mean, there's all kinds of activities. So there's 96 lessons that should be able to be done in most places, even if your nearby nature is quite difficult to access or degraded land. So hopefully that can be a resource, but bring nature inside your house.
Yeah, I'm going to put in the chat a link to our self-care and nature infographic, which has a couple of ideas that people can utilize at home or very close to home to integrate nature into their daily experience. And then Kate asks, Kate says, I'm starting some gardening activities for children and their guardians. Thank you for your reassurance about how these things can start small and to not be disheartened if no one comes. Do you have any more tips for getting families through the door for the first time, as we all know how hard doing things for the first time is? Thank you.
Make it seem fun. I always say, pretend like you're planning an outdoor gardening birthday party, and if it sounds fun, they'll come. So, but also acknowledge that people are so busy. The earlier you can put it on the calendar, the better. I have our camping reservations and day trip reservations made through June of 2024 already. So the earlier you can plan it, the better. And then just hand invite people. Don't expect that they're going to see it on a calendar or see it in social media. Go and physically talk to people and say, hey, I have this thing on Sunday. Would you like to come? Because then they connect you, your person, with the event, and there's trust there already building. And it happens to all of us. We have events 15 years in. We take 4,000 people a year outside personally by our staff. And we have events that are underattended. It just happens. And so just accept that that's okay. And it doesn't mean anything about the event you're offering, but plan it like a birthday party and people will come.
Well, thank you so much, Heather and Denise. This was amazing. Denise, can you share some final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I had some notes for some final thoughts, but I think I'm just going to roll with it, roll with my intuition. I think I'd like to throw out my final thoughts is that getting outside, getting outdoors is actually not that hard. We maybe have these grand ideas of these big things that we have to do to count, but really, like Heather was saying, just going out your door is a step. Bringing nature in and somehow is a step. So I would say be easy on yourself and just, yeah, don't make it, it's not hard. Don't make it hard. It doesn't have to be a big thing. The more fun that you can make something, the better. That's fun it's a deal killer for me. If something's not fun, I'm probably like not gonna do it because my time is really limited. And also I love to play. I'm just a big child. So yeah, I would say try to have low expectations, be easy on yourself, start with easy things, talk to your friends, talk to your family, like ask, like, hey, what do you want to do? What sounds fun? Let's do that thing and start there.
Heather, do you want to add?
I would say I'm going to give you an assignment, and your assignment is today, sometime during the day, and if not, by the end of the weekend, get together with your friends or your kids or your parents or your families or your classroom and make a wish list. make a list of all the things that you would like to try, even crazy stuff like I want to learn how to scuba dive, I want to learn how to ice climb, whatever it is. I want to start a garden. I want to find a ladybug. I want to make a leaf rubbing. I want to see a bright red leaf in nature. I want to learn how to paint, learn how to watercolor, learn how to draw, write a poem, anything, right? Make a wish list. As easy and hard, make a complete wish list. And then by Sunday, choose one thing you're going to try to do this summer. That's your homework.
Sounds good. And for extra credit, if you want to put it on your calendar, I put it in the chat. You can save the date for our next Families Together in Nature event, which will be on September 7th. It's Back to School with Nature, Social Emotional Learning and Academic Outcomes. Hope to see you all sharing your vitamin N challenges online with the hashtag Vitamin N Challenge. Check out the toolkit, choose your challenge, and make a plan. A recording of this event will be sent to all registered attendees in about 2 weeks. It'll also be available on our website around that time as well. Thank you again, Denice and Heather, so much for participating and sharing your experience and inspiration with our children and Nature Network community.